Joining me now by phone, former Secretary of Labor for the Clinton administration, Robert Reich. He's currently an economics professor at the University of California at Berkeley. He's also the author of The System, Who Rigged It, How We Fix It, which is out next week. So, Robert, 2 million jobless claims potentially as of next week. What exactly does that mean for our economy?
Well, Katie, it means that the economy is closing down, is shutting down. We have millions of workers who are either in very precarious situation right now. They don't know where their next paycheck is going to come from, or they are going to find themselves without work within the next week or two. This is unprecedented. It could lead to as many and as high an unemployment rate as about 20% within the next 3 weeks.
So if we get to that point, there are people out there who are looking or watching the show and wondering, are we avoiding a recession, a great recession, or are we actually trying to avoid here or headed towards a depression?
Well, I don't know what you call it. I mean, the economy is shutting down. It's not going to shut down permanently, obviously, but it could be for the next 2 or 3 or 4 months. Call it a deep recession, call it a depression. You don't want to panic people, but at the same time, it's very important for people to be very realistic. My concern is that 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And as those paychecks stop coming in for people, because people are being laid off, not only does the economy stop, but more importantly, people do not have the ability to pay their bills. Their rents or their mortgages or even going out and getting food. That is the most immediate problem. It's not the economy, it's people.
So given that, is a bailout the answer, or is it a suspension of bills from rent to utilities to car loans, student loans, mortgage payments? Is a suspension, just freezing it all in place, now a better scenario? So at least you get the people at the bottom who don't need to spend the money they have on rent or on their lights or their water or their heat or their power, and instead allow them to use that money to survive for the next few weeks or month or whatever it is, 2 months, to buy groceries, and then infuse that cash that you were going to give with $1,000 checks instead at the very top. Well,
the simplest thing would be if all creditors, everybody who was owed money, was able to give credit and give a loan, or basically to forgive what is owed right now. But that's not realistic, because those creditors, some of them themselves, have their own bills to pay. So the only way to do this, honestly, is for the government to get money out to people into their pockets just as fast as possible so that they can pay their bills, so that the people who actually get paid don't have to stop paying their bills.
Robert, well, what about people who aren't getting enough money? I mean, they're talking about $1,000 in the next couple weeks, 3 weeks, and maybe another $1,000 after that, depending on where you are on the income scale. And that's not going to pay all of everybody's bills every month. Maybe in some of the areas that are not as expensive to live in this country, yes. But in places in the cities, in New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Boston, Chicago, Miami, places where there are a lot of hourly workers working in restaurants or working in hotels, you can't get an apartment, a studio apartment, for $1,000 a month. You can't pay your rent and your utilities and your groceries for $1,000 a month, or just $1,000 as a bridge between now and whatever. So what sort of money should we actually be looking at?
Well, you're absolutely right, Katie. And these $1,000 checks, and $1,000 it's a typical weekly paycheck for the typical worker. But you are 100% correct. The cost of living varies dramatically from place to place around the country. What we really need is either more money out to more people, or we need banks issuing zero-interest loans to people.
But what about if they can't pay back those loans because this money is not going to come back that they're missing right now?
Well, those zero-interest loans need to be flexible. That is, what the administration is now thinking about is zero-interest loans to businesses, with the possibility that certain businesses don't have to pay them back. The administration ought to be considering zero-interest loans to people, with the possibility that people don't have to pay them back if they cannot do it. I mean, we are in a national emergency right now, and it is in everybody's interest that workers stay home. We don't want people to have to work, even if they are sick.
What about companies? What should be done with companies that use that big tax cut that the president gave a couple years ago, and instead of reinvesting it in their workforce or saving it for a rainy day like you're taught to do, instead bought back their own stocks?
These companies, in fact, I don't think it's really appropriate to give any kind of bailouts or subsidies to companies, particularly companies that are relatively large companies that made a lot of money from that tax cut in December of 2017. You are absolutely correct. They used that money to buy back their shares of stock, rewarding huge investors and CEOs and top executives who have a lot of those shares. No, there's no reason to suppose that those companies ought to be getting any money at all. And if it turns out that Congress and the president feel that there has to be some bailout, for example, the airline industry or the cruise ship industry or any other industry, then at the very least that those bailouts should come with strings attached. You cannot, for example, fire your workers. You've got to give them extended sick leave, and you cannot reward executive bonuses, and you can't provide and engage in the kind of stock buybacks that we saw these companies engaged in over the last couple of years.
It's just the beginning of a very long conversation. Robert Reich, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate all of your expertise and time.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.